Okay, folks. Tonight we're looking at the chapter 12 contents PowerPoint wise, and I'm going to be highlighting some key slides here. I'm going to be going pretty fast, but there will be a couple of spots where I focus in a little bit more as per normal. Um, they start out by making the point that in this age that we live in now, it's become so easy to unknowingly not be private. Right? In the past, you'd pull the shades in your house. People didn't know who you were. They would not know what's going on inside. And as Americans, I thought we always had this feeling that we can lead our private lives and not have a lot of people poke into our records and our information and find out all sorts of things about us. And then now we live in this era where we have Facebook and we just put it all out there, right? But still, we should have the right to be able to privatize what we're doing. They kind of go through here and they talk about, anonymity um, and I'm a big proponent of this, and I've kind of moved back to this in a lot of ways. Um, the one thing I always loved about paying with cash is there's no record of it, right? Except for the receipt that you might get handed. You can just take that, crumple it up, and throw it in the trash, and who would know any different? But I think it's brilliant because what's happened in the last like 30 years, folks, is we went from a situation where people were paying with cash all the time as a general rule, because you have money in your pocket, you can spend it, to where people started switching over to paying by checks and credit cards and other mechanisms. Thank you to the ATM and a point of sale kiosks where you could swipe your card really easily. But the mindset now that you just do about every transaction with some form of electronic payment. And the fact that every time we swipe that credit card or insert the chip into the machine, that MasterCard and Visa get a little portion of that transaction. And I think it's almost sinister in a sense. That's mind you, very much an opinion. But hey, even the mob would love a racket like that where they get 1 or 2 points on every transaction. Hey, that's a great racket, right? And we all do it and willingly, right? Now, why do we do it? Well, because if I spend my money or somebody grabs the money and runs with it, it's gone. I'm not getting it back. If I buy something with my Visa card and I have a complaint against the vendor, I have Visa to stand there with me and get that money back if I got cheated. So that's one of the reasons people do use it. One interesting thing, and I don't know how many of you guys have tried this, I switched over to using tap to pay. So I set up my phone to basically act as my payment card. And so I walk into most vendors, there's a couple of exceptions. You can't do it at like Walmart, I've discovered, and a couple of other big stores like Pick and Save. But most vendors have what they call tap. So you go up to the little kiosk credit card machine and they say insert card, swipe, or tap. And the tap is where you just get your phone kind of close when it's unlocked and it sends the payment information. And the beautiful thing is whether you use Google Pay, Apple Pay, or Samsung Pay, those are the big three, that all of them do not use your actual debit card or credit card number to make the payment. Yeah. And you know what, Jill, that's an excellent point. When the pandemic kicked in, all of a sudden people didn't want to touch your money because, hey, you're sick. You're going to spread your germs through your money. And what's dirtier than money? Really good point. And a lot of places are forcing you to use electronic payment. And if you're forced to use an electronic payment, the reason I like the whole tap thing and why I might have you consider using it is when you run a transaction, every time you do that, it uses an anonymized card number. It doesn't use your actual card number. So even if the person grabs the card number from the transaction, it's one use only. It goes away after that use. And that's one way that you can kind of protect yourself. So if you must pay electronically, I would encourage you to do that. Who has the right to control your information? Ultimately it's really you, because people can't know about you unless you share your information. And unfortunately, in some situations, we have to. So you come to Gateway and apply, you have to provide your name, address, phone number, social security number, all those things. And what we hope for is that it's all used internally and there's no problems. but the reality is there's lots of problems. And I'm kind of flipping through the slides here really quick, and they talk about this whole concept of privacy, and we'd like to think that the government is going to stand behind us and support our privacy, because we would think that's almost like a fundamental right as a human being. All right, and unfortunately, it's not, because the thing that happens is the fact that governments, and including our own, unfortunately, I hate to say that, it spies on its own people, and it's horrible, right, when you really stop and think about it. But at the same time, the argument for it, of course, is the fact that, well, this way they can monitor communications. They know when the terrorists are going to put that bomb together and stop something from happening before it does. And you know what? There's truth to that too. There's also this issue that a lot of big companies that sometimes provide the services to the government, or have their own data networks or whatever, are also spying on their customers, spying on their employees. And you can take this to heart, folks, that regardless of where you work, if you are attaching to their network using their computers, doing anything on their networks, basically, you are fundamentally agreeing to the fact that your place of employment can monitor all your communications, all your network traffic, anything you do on that device. And I would strongly encourage you, if you're doing like private things at work, that you turn off the Wi-Fi on your phone and work through your cellular network, through your cellular provider, where you do have a little bit more control over your privacy. Be careful what you do on your work network. Do you want to be fired because you were shopping Amazon while you were working? Think about it, right? People get fired like that all the time. People that really don't want their people on Amazon, they just lock it down and don't let them get there, or Netflix or whatever. Yeah, and then of course we have this other category, which is private parties, which is like the creepy stalker or hacker kind of category. A lot of people, frankly, voluntarily disclose their information. Think about Facebook. We heard during our IT advisory board meeting, it's like, hey, be careful what you put on Facebook, because we look. And if you think that people aren't looking, well, you're a fool to think that they're not looking before they try to hire you. I've also seen situations where people put stuff on Facebook where they're, let's say, posting a photograph of people. And I use this example a lot, but I had a friend who, when we were in high school together, he started working at Pick and Save, third shift as a stalker or whatever. All these years later, guess what? He still works for Pick and Save. In fact, he's the general manager of a whole bunch of stores at this point. So he worked up from stock boy all the way to general manager. And somebody from the old days, from high school, basically posted photographs of him having a good time and doing a bunch of things that I'm sure his bosses would not like him doing, and tagged him on it. And if you guys know how Facebook works, if your circle of friends, when you get tagged, that stuff starts popping up on their feeds, right? And of course, he was in a panic. How do I untag myself? And he was emailing me and stuff, and I showed him how to do it, right? But people get fired about stuff like that. And I want you to think about another thing that happens during employment practices with some corporations, especially ones that have sensitive public-facing personas. Some companies that you work for will ask you for your social media usernames and passwords as a condition of employment. I just want you to think about that for a second. It's not that far-fetched, and you know what? It happens all the time. And if you think your coworkers aren't looking at your stuff, or your boss is not looking at your stuff, they might not, legally, they're not supposed to, but they might anyhow, right? So be careful what you put out there, and think about what you put out there and what you're saying and what thoughts you're casting out into the ether, because they can come back to bite you. We saw a lot of like really nasty stuff flying around during the pandemic, during the elections, and a lot of people don't like have a filter, I think. And I want you guys to be a little more intelligent than that when you're out there. Go back to posting pictures of what you're eating and what your cat's doing. That's much smarter than political opinion or illegal activities. What I think is pretty interesting is there are organizations that actually step in and try to kind of monitor what's going on and set principles. And the idea is that you have a person within an organization that monitors these principles and makes sure that all the employees are accountable to the policies and the privacy policies to the level at which people agreed to participate. And they have these privacy principles attached to this this concept. Interestingly, in Europe, just not that long ago, actually, they passed this law, which is huge and landmark, and is now kind of changing the face of the internet. And the lawsuits were very strongly pointed at four big companies, mostly Google and Facebook, but also Apple and Microsoft. And those are kind of like the big four, IT companies that have huge user bases. And what they came down to is that if you develop a profile on one of these services and you put information into the service, that you should have a right as a user to completely eliminate all traces of yourself from that repository if you so choose. So if you're on Facebook and you decide to delete your account, your stuff that you posted and your images and your files and all the words you said and your messages should not exist forever on Facebook servers, where it can be used against you in the future. If you want to opt out and you don't want to share things and you want to delete that profile and every trace that you ever had on that service, you should be allowed to. And that was allowed to pass in Europe, and a very, very landmark. Here in the United States, guess what? Not so much, folks, right? The only state that has laws relative to this that probably will propagate out to the rest of the country is California, by the way. This map, I think, is very, very telling. It shows, if you look here, how restricted individual user data is from companies and how much control the individual users have over their privacy, with the blue and the green colors being really good. So people in these countries have some control or complete control. If you notice, countries like Chile and Finland, and I think Portugal, Greece, Denmark, Iceland, users have complete control over their data there. They want to delete it all, gone. It has to be. And in some of the other countries, where the green is a little darker or lighter, they have some level of control. And you notice that basically all the European Union countries have that, because it was decided, across the entire EU. Where it gets worse now, the orange countries. So unfortunately, we're in the orange category, where there's minimal restrictions against this. So companies like, Facebook gives you an account, and there's very, very little control from the government to say, hey, you can't sell that data, you can't mine that data, you can't look at that data. And so you guys have to assume, with that being the case, that any service that you're on and any information you're putting on it, somebody else is reading it. Your emails, your messages, your posts, your photos, all that stuff is being monitored. And you agree to it, folks. Then don't be surprised, that you get a telemarketing call, a few minutes later. Now, interestingly, they have a couple of countries here that effectively have no restrictions, but and that's kind of a little bit of a misnomer. So there's a couple of countries where they have a completely wide and open internet with no policies controlling it. And in some ways, I think that's horrible. And in other ways, I think, well, that's what the internet really is supposed to be. However, China is one of these countries that actually exists in isolation. The government has set it up there so that if they want to turn off internet access to the outside world, they can do so at a flip of a switch. They can shut down the whole country. You can't see anything. Google does not operate inside of China. It's not allowed. Do you guys know what they use instead? Anybody know the big Chinese search engine? No. Here, this is pretty interesting. It's called Baidu. Right. So this is the number one search engine in China, kind of like the only search engine in China. And notice how it looks a lot like our search engines. We just can't read any of the words. Fascinatingly, I always show this to my web students. What language did the Chinese write their code in? Well, English. And I always find that really funny, because so wait, so the Chinese are hacking us, but before they can hack us, they have to learn English. Then they can learn how to code in English, so they can hack us in English. Because even Chinese code is written in English. Thank God we came first and not the Chinese with the code, because otherwise we'd all be learning, these characters here to create code. But fascinating though that the Chinese are so restrictive about it. They lock things down and they control things. So like if you're in China, you cannot search for pornography, for example. How many Americans would go crazy without that? Probably many, unfortunately. But China has a very controlled society. They do have somewhat of a capitalistic free market system sort of going on, but there's still a communist dictatorship, folks, where 1/4 of the world's population exists. And it's kind of scary to think that 1 out of 4 people on planet Earth really do not have free access to the internet. They can't Google like silly cat videos and get to them the way we can here. So I think that it says effectively no restrictions. Yes, once you're inside the country, which is completely firewalled and protected, and you can't search for anything anyhow. So is that really not restricted? I'd say absolutely not. The U.S. uses a lot different approaches to this, and they talk about it being sectoral and talk about HIPAA and FERPA and all those things. But I think one of the more profound things that happened was 911, and within the last generation, where they developed the Patriot Act, where it kind of opened the door for the government to monitor us in a lot of different ways, most of the time without warrants and without specific reasons, just looking for anomalies in data and trying to catch people and trying to prevent them from doing another 911. And some people think that this bill should effectively die. Other people disagree. And many organizations now have moved to this opt-in and opt-out approach. And of course, we all love to use free websites and free software on the web. And one of the byproducts of doing that, like, Facebook is not free, folks. It is, but what are you providing? You're providing information about yourself and who your friends are and what your connections are. And then that information is sold to others, and that information has value. And there are people that are starting to jump off these platforms, but not in any significant numbers where I think it makes, in some ways much of a difference, frankly. What they do with that information, and why it ties into us, is people mine that data. And one of the assignment here in this unit that we're working on now, Unit 8, where they talk about how Target is like predicting like who is pregnant. And isn't that interesting? And you know what? Actually, Target does a bunch of other really interesting and kind of dastardly things too. And I'm not trying to get on their case because I do like shopping there, but Target and many retailers now have, for example, you walk into their store and because they have a metal roof, it's a hard time to get a cell signal, right? It's like, all right, I'll jump on their Wi-Fi. Now you're on their Wi-Fi. And now that you're on their Wi-Fi, you start walking around the store and you walk by a shelf and they see you like standing in front of the shelf with diapers, for example. And so now they're, targeting you. They actually have sensors on their shelves, folks, which talk to your phone and then start to say, well, this person spent 25 minutes looking at, laptops. Let's start targeting them. So this person is interested in laptops. We'll tie this into their personal information. We're now going to send out ads or flyers or who knows what, tie this into their social media. And now you have ads for laptops coming at you, is this bad? Maybe it's not bad. Maybe it's exactly what you want, because if you're shopping for a laptop, wouldn't it be better to get ads for laptops on your screen rather than, diapers, if you're not shopping for diapers? So that's arguments, both ways on that. They talk about the whole Snowden thing here. This has kind of been resolved since. We know the allegations were true and we know that he was digging up dirt, but one of the big things that it was all about, once again, tied back to the EU principle, basically the right for things to be forgotten, right? And I think this is pretty interesting. The thing that we don't realize often is when we are online, not only is the website that we're logging into tracking us, but often that website will be sharing through the mechanism of third-party cookies typically. So when you bounce from site to site to site, they create like a trail of the sites you visit, the things you're looking at, the people you interact with, the stuff you're shopping for, and it's all shared across these platforms. And I want you also to think really carefully when you're logging into like your Gmail or your Yahoo Mail that you probably in the agreement for getting that free access to email, you probably gave up the right for them to search your email. So I would say don't argue with your spouse, through email, and don't provide your bank account numbers through your email, that kind of stuff, because somebody is able to read it, right? You want truly private email? Set up your own domain, get your own hosting, get your own custom email account, and don't run it through Google, Yahoo, or Microsoft, or Apple, or anybody, and even then, I would have concerns. Unless you're running the email server right in your own home, it's still possible for it to be hacked and tracked and all those things. All right, kind of moving on to a couple of other things here. Cookies are one of those things. You don't have to worry about cookies too much because there are ways to block these third-party cookies and the potential for abuse. In fact, the one big tip that I give people is you can add tracking blockers and pop-up blockers and ad blockers to your browsers. But I would strongly suggest, and I should probably do it now, that you guys try the Brave browser. And if you're worried about any of the stuff that you're doing online, this is really a good option because of the automatic tracking blocking that's built into this browser. And I forget if I demonstrated this browser in class before. I thought I did. But this is kind of my favorite go-to if I think that I'm going to do something online where I'm worried about maybe my information, leaking out or whatever. Like when I look at like my stock accounts and my bank accounts and etc., or even my Bitcoin account, right? I do it through the Brave browser because I know there's no third-party trackers happening in the browser. And it's a pretty interesting product. It is built on the Chrome engine, but by default, tracking, blocking, ad pop-ups, all that stuff is just blocked automatically by default. You actually have to turn it on if you want it to happen. And you would be amazed at some websites you go to using the Brave browser and how many trackers pop up. Sometimes a couple, sometimes dozens. And I hate it, And you know what? They're really invading our privacy and they're making connections between websites, and you can fight it. You can fight it with technology. You can fight them with their own tools, basically. And I think this one, this is kind of the browser, by the way, for those in the know. And then there's also a search engine for those in the know, which is DuckDuckGo. It runs on top of like the Bing and Yahoo search parameters. It doesn't run on top of Google, and you are completely not tracked when you search. So I would encourage you to use both of those products if you're concerned about your privacy online and what information is being shared. And if you're not concerned, well, you should be. Because there is reason for concern. I'll be real frank. There is absolute reason for concern. So don't make this naive assumption that people aren't digging into your information. And the reason I speak of this, and I kind of do this with a little bit of a plan, but sometimes it just falls into place, is this whole concept of identity theft. And I don't know if anybody here has ever had identity theft in any way, shape, or form, but it's not a pretty thing. I've been victim of it, and here I am, pretty techno savvy, but it wasn't me. I swear, it wasn't me. What it was is the IRS got hacked, and they stole the basic information, including social security numbers, for about 40 million U.S. citizens. It was one big hack. It was like all these people on one server, basically. And what happened when my identity was stolen, I didn't even know it was stolen. Basically, they accessed, my name, my social security number, which is enough to file taxes. So somebody filed income taxes on my behalf. And the year that happened, I was, silly. I waited till the last minute, of course, to do it. Classic American fashion. The eve of the 15th at 11:30 p.m. That kind of thing. And then I got to the point where I was done with it, and I hit the submit button to file electronically, and I kept getting a reject notice from the IRS. And what had happened is somebody had already filed taxes on my behalf and collected a tax return. And I was really miffed because that year I was due to get back, I think it was like a 5-figure amount. I had so much tax money coming back, and I couldn't access it for almost 2 years. It took me 2 years of wrestling with the IRS in order to get that money back. And ultimately, the only way I was able to solve the problem was to get with the IRS's Consumer Advocacy Division. And they figured out in the process that the IRS not only allowed somebody else to steal my information, file on my behalf, and collect money, but when I filled out the forms to get it corrected, somebody who was interviewing me did not check a box on a form, and that was enough for me not to get my money for 2 years. They fixed it, got the box checked or whatever the step was, and then I had my money with interest, by the way, and that was a really nice thing. But now every time I file, I have to go through one additional step that most taxpayers don't, is I have a special filing pin I have to use as a result of it. I've known other people that have had identity theft. Sometimes it's like as simple as like stealing your credit card number. I guess that's happened to me too, where, and this happened by a skimmer where you take your plastic and you go to an ATM or a retail kiosk or whatever, and you swipe your card, and somebody has put a device in there that's stealing the card number. And then, the person took my card number and started buying stuff at a store I never bought stuff at before. Unfortunately, my bank and Visa helped stand behind me and get my money back. And then, of course, I changed my card number immediately. I don't know. I'm sure that's probably happened. A lot of people get their card numbers stolen, by the way. One thing I always advise to people is, and this is a real common thing, especially for people that go out for libations, right? So if you go out to a bar and they're like, do you want to start a tab? And everybody's like, yeah, I'm going to have a whole bunch of beer. Here's my card, right? And it sits on the bar. And then all you have to do is, if you're a bartender, click, take a bunch of pictures, flip the card over, take a picture. Who's to know? You're buying stuff online with this person's information. And it happens all the time. So I strongly suggest against that, by the way. I'm not saying that people are doing that on purpose, but some people are. Some people are dastardly like that. And if you've ever seen how a lot of people handle that kind of stuff, it's kind of interesting. All right, let's kind of move on. Some of the yes.
Can I have you back up a little bit to when you were talking about cookies?
Yes.
Did something change in the last year or two? Because I do a lot of internet searches for work where I need to collect, product information, things like that. And almost every manufacturer's website that I go to, I get a notice about cookies where, 5 years ago, I don't recall seeing that, but now it's like almost every search.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm going to a news website hoping to trigger exactly that. And maybe I've already accepted it on this website. Can you give me an example of one of your manufacturers?
Diversity.com.
Is like so?
SEY. You've got just SEY there. Yeah.
Like the Chicago street. Right. Okay. Excellent, Cindy. Thank you. Yeah,
Sure.
and we're seeing these messages. So now, why do these messages exist all of a sudden? Ever since that EU law was passed, in the EU, any company that plans to operate in the EU has to put this out there. And so what most people are going to do, of course, is they're going to say, I'll accept all cookies. I just want to serve, right? But there's cookie settings here, and you can actually go in here and go through and change some of these. You can turn them on and off. Do you want performance cookies? No. Do you want functional cookies? No. So you can turn on and off which cookies you want. Sometimes cookies are absolutely required for a website, just to make it work. But in other cases, like targeting cookies, like the tracking ones in particular, you would turn those off. And most people don't take the time to do this because they're usually in a hurry, right? Mm-hmm. But they put this up because of European law and California law. So California law also requires this. So now a lot of American websites, if they want to do business with California, they got to put this stuff on their sites. If they're running cookies and they're worried legally about privacy issues, they absolutely have to do this.
Okay.
And I would encourage you guys, if you're digging in on these things, you should take a moment every once in a while and read through and actually select the cookies, and turn off anything you don't need to have on. And you know what? They do the same thing on our operating system too. I booted up Windows on this brand new machine yesterday, and it had a whole screen of like, do you want location on? Do you want Find My Device on? Do you want advertising tracking on? Do you want, and these are all in my operating system. And I did turn most of them off, by the way. I kept the Find My Device one. I think that's a good one to have on. But, that really becomes a personal choice. But Cindy Lou, thank you for bringing that up, because this is a really good thing. I'll probably never come back to this site again, by the way, but just unless I start working for your company, Cindy Lou. Right? Not likely. All right, let's move on to talk about viruses a little bit. So we talked about a couple of tools earlier that you can use, but these are the categories of viruses, and I know you can read about it in the chapter, but these are what I would call the most common forms. They talk about what does malware do, and in some cases they do all of these things. So you have things that can allow backdoors, and meaning people can log into your computer remotely and take control of it. By the way, that's what that means. Trojans, for example, keyloggers. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that term, but people can run certain pieces of software where if they can't intercept your internet traffic, they get the software installed on the computer where it records every keystroke. Now, why is that useful? Well, you're typing in passwords all the time. That's why it's useful. Or you're sending some nefarious message, attack, and you can get that message beforehand. That might be kind of helpful. Ransomware, that's where, people are taking your files and locking them and then ask for payment in order to unlock them. And that's been really huge on networks, by the way. We've seen that the number one target now for ransomware is, guess what? Education has become the number one target. When the pandemic started, you know who's the number one target? Hospitals, right? Yeah, so hospitals needed to process stuff quickly, and they were like, now we're going to mess with them because they're going to pay, right? And you know what? A lot of big organizations paid. They paid the money to unlock their stuff, giving in basically to the hijackers and learning a really, really harsh lesson. Because if you think about a hospital, how they do everything electronically now, and all of a sudden, all your records are locked for all your patients, and you're trying to operate a hospital, it's like, break out the checkbook, pay them the money, let's get rolling. You don't even bat a hat, and they probably just put in an insurance claim afterwards. And then what I like that's in this PowerPoint, though, and I'm glad that the author did this, is okay. So he tells all these bad things that can happen. So what can I do to stop them from happening? Right? That's really more important. And I want you to look at these and think about them. So turn off Bluetooth when not in use on your phone too. So if you're not like Bluetoothing to a speaker or a set of headphones or your car stereo, and you're walking around in a store with your Bluetooth on, people turn it off. That's a point of attack, by the way. Keep your phone and other computers locked. Yeah, put passwords on your devices. If you don't have your phone locked and somebody can just pick it up, hit the button and turn it on. Well, if you have like tap to pay, that's really bad for one thing. But you should use, challenging passwords, biometrics, which is what I use. So I can unlock my phone with a fingerprint. I can just do this to unlock it. I can also unlock it by having it scan my face or my eyes, PIN number, all those things. But don't ever, ever, ever leave those devices unlocked. Especially if you connect to your email accounts, your bank accounts, pay for anything with your phone. Absolutely don't. Don't automatically click on email attachments. Hey, it said free, or 15% off or whatever. Don't click on things just because. If you're not sure, stay away. Google it, research it before you do. Avoid entering sensitive information in a pop-up. Okay, I think that's pretty pertinent. And of course, you saw like even those hackers, pointing out the fact that, websites will indicate if they're secure or not. If that lock's not turned on, don't type in your stuff, folks, period. And if it's a pop-up that's coming up, well, you better make sure it's coming from that site, because who knows if it actually is. Websites get hijacked all the time. Thinking of getting something for nothing, think again, right? Facebook is free, but is it? Spotify is free, but is it? All those things. Think about it. There's a price for free. It's not really truly free. Know where you're going. Be skeptical. Extreme care when visiting notorious sites. I'm not sure what a notorious site is. I guess don't go to the Silk Road online. You guys know what that is?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Where you can buy like literally anything.
Yeah, and that's part of like the dark web through Tor. Yeah, you can buy literally anything, although it has been shut down, but it does try to creep back once in a while. When you're working with sites where you do put in passwords and they offer you multi-factor authentication, and most banks, for example, enforce that, where you might have to answer a text message or a code or something to get into the site, you should do that. And I've been kind of, now switching my working paradigm. I go to a site, I set up an account, I type in a new password, and Google will step in, Google Chrome, because I save my passwords in the browser, and say, hey, do you want us to generate a automatically super duper hard to guess password automatically? And I always used to say no and type my own. And now I'm like, I don't know, I think that's a good idea, because I can always get to my password list in the browser. And I want you guys to know this, that if you store your passwords in your browser, you can actually see them here. And yeah, I could click a button and show you my passwords. I would have to authenticate, they're obscured, but if I put in my Windows password, I can see it. And then the other thing that you can do is you can check to see if your passwords have been compromised. Now, a few different browsers do this now, but I think this works really well in Google. And they'll say, hey, wait, this website's been hacked, so you better change your password, right? But if I forget a password, I can always come here and look it up. But if I'm always using Chrome to access my site and it autofills my passwords, what do I have to worry about it? On my phone, if my browsers are linked, and you can do that. So you can actually, a lot of people don't know this, but you can sign into your browsers and you can sync them across devices. So if I use Chrome on my laptop and then go over to my Mac and use Chrome, and I'm signed in, and I go to my phone and I sign into Chrome, all the passwords are synced together. And that's really super helpful, by the way. You can do that with your payments as well. And that's, I think, a really good thing to know. All right. What if something bad happens? Let's say you think your computer's actually infected. All right. Yeah. So if you think you're infected, attacked, being remote controlled, it's being used for some nefarious reason, turn it off. Better yet, if you think it's coming through the internet, disconnect the internet, turn off the Wi-Fi, go into airplane mode or whatever, turn that stuff off so that further attacks don't happen, your machine's not being manipulated. If you want to figure out what's going on with it, then don't be looking it up on that machine. Go to a different machine and look it up. And the other way that if you need to rescue files from that machine, which sometimes happens, is if you have your Windows Restore Media or some sort of a bootable device, usually like a Linux utility disk or USB stick, you can boot up the device and rescue your files at the very least before they get all completely compromised. But I think that's pretty good. Now, the people that are really smart, and that's usually people that have experienced this a few times or have worked professionally in the field, get smart enough to come up with a way to prevent these problems from getting really bad. So the one huge recommendation, and we hear this from our IT department all the time, which is why they enforce all our user machines. So if I have like a school laptop, they install software up on there that says, well, if there's a Windows update, your machine is doing it. Because most of the updates that Windows does, at least the critical ones, sometimes there are interface changes, but most of them are improving security on the machine. They found a hole that somebody can hack through. They figured out how to plug it. Here's the update. You better put that update in immediately, right? So always run current versions of software, because many times those updates in the most current versions are the most secure. So whenever there's an update available, you should install it. I know that some people have the opposite opinion of that, because there are times when you do updates and that messes up your machine, right? Usually those issues are pretty minor. I discovered it with my old laptop, for example. Whenever I would do like certain types of updates, I might have to reinstall my sound drivers, But I learned that, and then I learned to work around it. It says install antivirus software. Okay, true. But remember, Windows now offers it for free. It's built in. It's turned on automatically. Most consumer machines will come preloaded with some commercial software that after a while will ask you to pay. And my advice is when they start to ask to pay, just uninstall, reboot, Windows Defender will be active. And frankly, I think it works better than most of the commercial products. Has been my experience. Another thing that they say is if you have a router at home, make sure that you set the password security as high as it goes. And so sometimes the routers will offer you really simple, password options, but their recommendation is to set it to at least the WPA2 level because it is significantly more difficult to crack those. But I do want to let you know that Wi-Fi routers are crackable. In fact, the tools that hackers use have built into them Wi-Fi cracking applications, and yeah, people do that stuff, unfortunately. So if you're in an area where there's high density of population, that's much more apt to happen. So like when I'm here in the house and I'm on the first floor, I'm in the basement right now, but when I'm on the first floor, I fire up a computer and go to the Wi-Fi list. I can probably see like 50 or 60 access points from my house. We have an apartment building next to us, lots of multi-family, multi-unit housing around us, and really, really close together buildings. I mean, the building to the south of me is like 3 feet away, and that's the one that's farthest away. The other one is 18 inches away. So we're really tightly packed in an urban environment. So of course you can see your neighbor's Wi-Fi. And you know what? People get bored sometimes and try to hack. And then you get the people who just kind of think that they don't need a password. People do that still. Although most routers now are pretty good about that. The passwords you choose are important too. Here's the reality. If you ask most people what their password is, and they tell you, you will discover it probably is one of these things, a combination of them, or aspects of them. Your children, your spouse's name, your pet's name, your birth dates, your street address, your zip code. Should I go on? And think about that. If your passwords fit into that category, you've just made it so much easier for somebody to hack you. And what happens is people, basically do investigation of people. So if they can find your personal information, like your name, your address, your phone number, they go up on Facebook, they see who your kids are, what their names are, who your friends are. Here's my dog Fluffy. Fluffy was born on March 22nd or whatever. And then you're going in there, Fluffy 322, and there you are, you're in. And I want you to think about that, because if you are using passwords like that, you're really easy to hack, folks. Really, really, really easy to hack. It's unbelievable, actually, how many people use bad passwords. They go through this whole thing talking about encryption here, and I do recommend that you read that. I'm not going to test you on it or anything like that. They show how it works and why it's important and all those things. But I really kind of want to get down to this, the end of this talk here, which is talking about data. And of course, being in a data program, this is pretty critical to us, because if I'm working on a machine and my machine gets compromised, let's say somebody figures out my password, they can tunnel into my home network. Maybe they've launched like a backdoor or some Trojan software on my machine, and my machine is maybe gets ransomware and my files are locked. Okay, well, that can be tragic, right? So if all your family photographs are on that hard drive and now some hacker took control and is asking you for a couple $1,000s in Bitcoin to get your pictures back, that's kind of on you, really, right? Because really what you should be doing, and I'm actively in the process of doing this here at home because I'm switching machines now, is you should back up your data. In fact, you might want to get smart and use some of the strategies we talked about in the file management segment, where you keep anything that's actively being worked on or really important. Maybe consider keeping that in the cloud, so that if somebody steals your machine, you can get back to those files. Or make a regular habit of backing up your stuff. And there's so many different ways to do it now. But one of the easiest ways to do it is buy an external hard drive, plug it in every once in a while, copy all your stuff over to it. and then do it regularly. And if you want to be double safe, make a second copy and take that other one up north or over to your friend's house or in the safety deposit box, because how valuable is that data? What would you do if you lost it? More importantly, and I sit here, on a new machine, and I'm looking at the files on my old machine, literally, and thinking about which ones I'm going to transfer over and which ones I'm going to put into archives. And then I look over here to my shelf, and I've been one of these geeks, and so I might be an extreme case, but I have every electronic file I've ever created on a computer, except for the ones I deleted. But the ones I thought worthy of keeping over time, I have every single one from the day I owned my first computer. I still have everything on hard drives, floppy drives, CD-ROMs, other machines. I have stacks of hard disks sitting just feet for me that don't even sit inside of machines but hold my data. So whenever I would get rid of an old machine, and a lot of people don't think about this, I'm done with that old laptop, give it to Goodwill, right? Did you reformat the hard drive or reinstall Windows? Probably not. And even if you did, people can undo those actions and still get your files. And so whenever I would get rid of a machine, take the hard drive out here. Yeah, you got to buy a hard drive, sorry. And I have those hard drives sitting here. I don't want anybody getting their hands on my data. And I have the capability of retrieving any data I've ever created that I thought was worth keeping. And I think that's kind of profound. I don't think a lot of people think like that. But I have some things that frankly, I could part with, other things that are kind of fun to look back on. But more importantly, I have some things I absolutely don't want to lose, like all my digital photographs and all the videos I've shot of the kids. And, those things are indispensable, right? And I always use the adage of what's the one thing you grab when the house catches on fire? What do you grab first? A lot of people, it's the photo album or maybe your important documents, and same is true with the computer, but you are responsible for making sure that your data is backed up and secure. And sometimes, unfortunately, the only way you learn that lesson is for something really tragic to happen, like your computer blows up, catches fire, gets stolen, or whatever, and all that stuff is gone. I've used as an example many times. Maybe you guys have heard this one before, especially Cindy, Lou, and Jill, right? Where when I was teaching at the Art Institute, we used to give out drives from the same brand, from the Lacey brand, the rugged drives. So a student would sign up for a program there, and they'd give them a 2 terabyte, a drive with their tuition. So they'd go through the program. And the thinking is, you sit down at a machine, you do your work, you put everything on that hard drive, and you have a way to store it. Brilliant idea. I think very nice, very kind. And for a lot of people that couldn't afford to buy it, cool, and then I saw in a classroom once, a student was sitting there working and had her drive plugged in. It's like, hey, I'm going to run to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Came back, drive was gone. Her whole academic career was on that drive. She had no backups. Her entire digital portfolio, all the work she did, 4 years of college, gone in one instant. Nothing to show for all the stuff she created. Nothing. The only backup she had was what she emailed to her instructors, which most of the time with digital files is way too big to put in an email anyhow. Right? And so don't let that happen to you. If you don't back up your files currently and you have stuff you want to keep, do it immediately. Find a way to do it. Back up to the cloud, back up to a disk, make redundant copies, take one up north, mail it to yourself, put it in the safety deposit box or whatever, but don't lose that stuff. All right. Just about done here, folks. External hard drives, do you do full backups, partial backups? People that really value their systems will do full backups often, and partial backups even more often. For me, I usually don't worry about the operating system and the applications. I worry more about my data than anything else. And I assure you, I back up my stuff all the time and to multiple locations. And anything I'm actively working on, school, for example, any of my school stuff, it's all on Google Drive. Sure, take my computer, all my work is still there. No problem. Give me another machine, log in, I'm good. Right? And that's the situation you want to be in. Computer can be replaced. The data cannot. Data is more important than probably anything. So, um, they go through a couple of other things here. Um, sometimes, and I like that they include this, you might be on a hard drive and you may have deleted a whole bunch of stuff. And then you go, oh my God, I shouldn't have deleted that. Has that ever happened to you?
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. All right, I'm just trying to pull up a generic file folder here. Let's just pull up this one. All right. And let's just say I'm on my desktop and here we are, and that's actually not my desktop. That's my transfer of my desktop. And let's say I have a whole bunch of files here in my keep folder. And here's this really important file I have, and I accidentally hit delete. Oh my God, right? Well, first of all, in Windows, we know we can go to the recycle bin and pull it back, right? Did you also know you can Control Z that?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a really handy one, by the way. Another thing happens though is let's say I deleted it and then hit empty on the recycle bin. Is it recoverable?
Probably. Mhm.
Yeah, it absolutely is. As long as you haven't overwritten space on the drive, 35 times on a regular hard disk, by the way, and 2 times on a SSD, you can recover that data. And there's very specific pieces of software. This is one of them that I strongly suggest. This is made by the same people that make CC Cleaner and Specky and a bunch of these other products. But Rakuva is one of these free tools, by the way, that is super, super useful. There's a free version of it, so you don't even have to pay for it. And you run it on your machine, and it finds files that have been deleted and can recover them as much as they can be recovered. Now, very interesting on Windows machines. Whenever you take a file and you delete it, what Windows really does in the background is it renames it, and it takes the first character of the file name and changes it to a $sign. And that's the indicator in Windows. If I can find the $sign on my keyboard here, got this fancy new keyboard. But that's Windows' strategy for deleting file. Changes one character, and hypothetically the file is deleted. That sounds like a pretty primitive approach, but that's exactly how they do it. Why would you sit there and spend the time to, overwrite every sector? It's silly. You just change the first character. It just says this is obsolete. Do whatever you want with storage space. But that tool can allow you to recover files that aren't completely overwritten very easily. And it's completely free, folks. And so, like, oh, hurry up. My wife is coming home. Better hide my internet search history. Well, if she's got Rakuva, she's busting you anyhow. So these are tools that hacking professionals use, and this is a publicly available too. And there's much more sophisticated ones, by the way, where you can extract information from hard drives that are even inoperable, by the way, in most circumstances. So keep that in mind, because that's a strategy too. So people will take like an old machine, reformat the hard drive, reload Windows, not knowing that a lot of those sectors, with the right tools, you can still pull back all the information that's there, every little bit of it. And if you think about standard old-fashioned hard drives, spinning metal platters, you have to overwrite that data 35 times at a minimum before it can be completely assured that you cannot retrieve that information. Now that's pretty profound. Scary at the same time, but pretty profound. That's really kind of about it, folks. In terms of material, I know we're a couple of minutes over, but I think we had some pretty good information here, and I want you to at least think about these things and how you apply them. And then, of course, our assignment for this week talks about the situation with Target. So make sure that you read the PDF first and then answer one of the 3 questions. You don't need to answer all 3, but I do want you to just say, more than yes or no. So please answer thoroughly and give me some ideas on why you think things are a certain way, and please support your answer. I'm looking for about a page worth of content, double space. So don't just give me like 2 sentences. If you want to earn those, this is a 5-point assignment. So give me some content, but you only have to answer one of those questions. And honestly, if you really start to think about, whether these actions are ethical or legal, there's a lot of issues that get raised up. And the purpose of this is to get you to think about these topics and then to think about how you participate in these things on a personal level. And hopefully maybe alter your practices a little bit and get a little wiser about what information you're putting out into the world, how you look at information, how you secure it, and how you protect it. Because ultimately you're in control. All right, this recording ends here, folks.